Hey guys, tonight we drift into the foggy, olive-scented slopes of ancient Greece, where the gods are loud, lightning is personal, and a mortal's worst mistake is usually making eye contact with a goose. You're standing at the foot of Mount Olympus, craggy, cold, and impossibly tall. Up above, the clouds shimmer with lazy thunder, because somewhere up there, Zeus is probably getting grumpy. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave a comment with your location and local time. It's always cozy to know who else is listening out there in the dark. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Mount Olympus. It's not just a mythic mountaintop, it's a neighborhood of divine drama. You coast upward through clouds that taste like oregano and summer thunder, peeking through to see a golden city where the gods dwell. Think less angelic realm and more eternally squabbling family with supernatural powers. Olympus has no elevators, but the staircases are just for mood. Tonight, they're feeling particularly lazy, so you coast right up past Hera's greenhouse and Apollo's sunbed collection. The first thing you notice, Olympus is loud. Not with noise exactly, but with ego. Every building looks like a competition entry for best temple facade. Statues of gods that are probably also the gods themselves, just pretending to be statues, dot the courtyards. You drift past a fountain shaped like a swan, which, knowing Zeus, might have actually been Zeus once, depending on who he was trying to seduce at the time. Zeus himself lounges in the middle of the plaza on a throne that looks like it was forged from starlight and ego. He's mid-yawn, beard twitching, eyes scanning the sky for excuses to hurl thunder. And of course, Hera stands beside him, arms crossed, judging every immortal in sight with the precision of someone who once memorized an entire wedding guest list just to hold lifelong grudges. They're surrounded by their divine offspring and associates, most of whom pretend not to be related when Zeus is in one of his "I'm the king of gods, hear me roar" moods. It's always a little awkward. The whole divine family structure is, frankly, a mess. Take Hephaestus, limping god of fire and forge, born from Hera alone in a rage spiral, flung off Olympus as a baby, and then later forced to marry Aphrodite. Family therapy wasn't invented yet, but if it had been, they would have needed 12 therapists and a few lightning-proof couches. Still, historians argue whether this divine dysfunction was simply a reflection of Greek society or a convenient metaphor for humanity's most unfixable personality traits. Maybe it's both. Maybe Zeus is your inner id, and Hera is your passive-aggressive superego. Either way, you're glad you're not invited to family dinner. Mainstream historians agree Olympus was meant to represent a heavenly bureaucracy, gods with departments, personalities, turf wars, and the occasional mortal intern who accidentally becomes a constellation. But fringe theories suggest Olympus is less a place and more a state of consciousness, somewhere between a dream and a warning. Which kind of fits the vibe. You float past Hermes, who's racing himself in mirror dimensions. Artemis glares at you from behind a moonbeam, holding a deer like it's a purse. And somewhere far below, a mortal sacrifices a goat, hoping someone up here is in a good mood. But that's the thing. These gods, they're rarely in good moods. Immortality gets boring. So to keep things spicy, they meddle. With mortals. With each other. With fate. Zeus can't help himself. You picture him playing lightning bolt darts with human lives, whispering things like, "Let's make this guy fall in love with a seaweed nymph just to see what happens." And so begins your sleepy descent into mythology. Because the gods are just getting warmed up, and you, well, you're about to nap your way through their chaos. Before we float into specific personalities, it's worth noting that Mount Olympus isn't physically reachable. It's not about geography, it's spiritual altitude. Even the ancient Greeks didn't really hike up there with trail mix and good hiking boots. It was more theatrical than topographical. And no, the gods don't sleep. But you do. Which is why they keep things weird but quiet after sunset. Kind of like that one upstairs neighbor who rearranges furniture at 3 a.m., but only metaphorically. As you sway along marble walkways that sometimes become clouds, and sometimes just dissolve, you hear echoes of a lyre. Laughter from Dionysus's latest vineyard rave, and soft hoofbeats, probably centaurs on an off day. Above you, Pegasus glides with dramatic indifference. Below, mortals wonder whether praying is worth the goat. You, on the other hand, are already halfway asleep. The myths are just starting. Zeus is cracking his knuckles. And someone, probably Hermes, just stole the ambrosia cooler. You drift past a golden colonnade, spiraling lazily around an open courtyard filled with divine egos and slightly burnt ambrosia. It's here that you encounter Aphrodite. She's not glowing, she's radiating, like someone dipped the concept of beauty in gold leaf and sprinkled it with crushed rose petals. Her robe floats around her like it doesn't believe in gravity. And when she speaks, the air smells vaguely like warm honey and sandalwood. You lock eyes. Bad move. Instantly, your heart rate spikes and your feet forget how to exist. That's Aphrodite for you. Goddess of love, passion, and completely impractical relationships. Born from sea foam, or from the severed bits of Uranus tossed into the ocean, depending on how Greek your dinner party gets. She's the original romantic chaos agent. Historians still argue whether Aphrodite was imported from older Eastern goddesses or simply emerged from Greek culture's need to blame somebody for love triangles. Either way, she's eternal, and she's everywhere. Every stolen glance, every bad decision at a wedding, every breakup text that ends with, "We were never really compatible. I'm a Virgo." Beside her is Ares, god of war, all biceps and smoldering pout. They're an item, sort of. Except Aphrodite is technically married to Hephaestus, who's off somewhere, forging a shield that can withstand passive aggression. Ares flexes as you float by, trying very hard to look like he isn't deeply insecure about being the hot but emotionally unavailable boyfriend of Olympus. It's awkward, honestly. You drift faster, the courtyard shifts, and now you're hovering beside Apollo. He's lounging with a lyre, shirtless, of course, sun glinting off his annoyingly perfect hair. God of music, poetry, medicine, and the sun. Because apparently being in charge of one domain wasn't enough for Apollo's ego, he plays a lazy melody and winks at a dryad who is clearly not interested. You can almost hear her internal monologue. If he compares my eyes to olives one more time, I swear. The lyre tune drifts through your head like a half-remembered dream. You hum along, out of tune. Apollo has a twin, of course. Artemis. She's nearby, glaring. Where Apollo is loud and warm, Artemis is moonlight and sharp edges. She's the goddess of the hunt, of wild animals, of unmarried women who'd rather camp alone than date a satyr. She holds her bow with a grip that says, "Do not mansplain forest ecosystems to me." And her silver robes rustle like warning bells. You try not to meet her eyes. She once turned a guy into a stag just for peeking at her bath. Talk about setting boundaries. Somewhere in the distance, Dionysus is already tipsy. The god of wine, theater, and glorious chaos. He's probably dancing in a toga made of grapevines, declaring every night a festival. The air grows warmer and louder as you drift toward his domain, where music pulses and nymphs toss flower crowns like confetti. It's tempting to stay, to sip something fizzy, and forget that mortals exist. But you keep moving. There's too much to see, and the gods are just getting started. You glide past a hall of mirrors, where Narcissus once saw his reflection and fell in love. He's long gone now, of course, but his ghost lingers in every Instagram filter and thirst trap across history. Aphrodite strolls by again, basking in the afterglow of her own legend. She winks. At you, at Ares, at the concept of winking itself. You can't tell. The gods bicker, constantly, and not just over power or love. One time, Apollo and Hermes had a rap battle over stolen cows. Yes, really. Hermes invented the lyre from a tortoise shell because apparently stealing cows wasn't chaotic enough without musical accompaniment. Zeus laughed so hard, he nearly dropped a thunderbolt on Corinth. Fringe scholars still debate whether the gods' antics were symbolic morality plays or just the world's longest-running soap opera. Either way, it worked. The Greeks remembered the stories, passed them down, and sometimes even built temples out of sheer guilt. You hover now over a mosaic of swirling patterns and half-forgotten mythic trivia. Did you know there's a goddess of gossip? Pheme. She whispers through crowds, inflates rumors, and basically invented Twitter thousands of years early. And yes, her wings are made of tongues. Sleep on that, beneath your feet, or perhaps above them. It's hard to tell now. You sense the mortal world. Cities flicker in torchlight, philosophers argue in togas, and people pray for good harvests, love, or vengeance. The gods listen, occasionally, mostly when it's convenient. You pass Athena next, stoic, armored, and clearly the only one with a filing system. Goddess of wisdom, strategy, and slightly scary owls. She was born from Zeus's forehead, which sounds like a metaphor, but in Greek mythology, it's oddly literal. One headache, a crack of the skull, and boom, full-grown goddess in armor. Try explaining that at your next MRI. Athena is always watching. She doesn't blink much. You get the feeling she's already calculated your dreams before you've had them. She nods once, approvingly, like a teacher who just saw you remember to label your chart axes correctly. And now, somewhere in this divine haze, you begin to feel the weight of stories untold. There are so many more, gods minor and major, heroes tragic and absurd. You haven't even met Hades yet, or wandered through the underworld, or puzzled over why Persephone didn't just pack a snack, but that's all to come. For now, you're adrift in myth, drowsy on nectar, floating past gods who are equal parts powerful and petty. Above you, the stars begin to shimmer. Constellations forming from gossip, glory, and goat entrails. Olympus hums softly, like a lullaby told in thunder and laurel leaves. You blink slowly, lulled by that shimmering sky. And suddenly, you're not drifting through Olympus anymore. You're trudging through a rocky mountain path, sandals slipping on gravel, cursed by the gods to take this hike with no water bottle or podcast. Welcome to the realm of mortals, where Greek myths really come to life, mostly by ruining someone's week. The first story that takes shape around you is that of Prometheus, the ancient titan who looked at humanity and thought, you know what they need? Fire and drama. So naturally, he stole a flame from Mount Olympus and gifted it to humans, probably thinking it would be used to roast chestnuts or warm bathwater. But you know how this ends. We invented war, deep-fried cheese, and those reality shows where everyone cries in a hot tub. Zeus, not exactly a fan of rebellion, unless he's the one rebelling, punishes Prometheus in the classic Greek style: eternity, blood, and a bird. Chained to a cliff, Prometheus gets his liver eaten daily by an eagle. It regenerates overnight, and the cycle repeats. Historians still argue whether this myth is a metaphor for guilt, divine consequence, or just a weird ancient Greek fear of birds. As you climb, your sandals crunch against bones left by Icarus, the guy who invented wax wings, soared toward the sun, and discovered thermal engineering the hard way. You wince at the memory of high school science fairs. His dad, Daedalus, was the original Greek engineer, designed the labyrinth, built escape wings, and probably had a very complex relationship with duct tape. But Daedalus made it out alive. Icarus didn't. Let that be a warning. Follow the rules of thermodynamics, or you might end up as a metaphor in a 2 a.m. history video. Now, through a stand of cypress trees comes a rustle, then a snarl. You don't have to turn around to know it's the chimera. Lion head, goat body, snake tail. Basically the monster version of a "we had leftovers" casserole. But don't worry. Bellerophon, the hero who rode Pegasus, slayed it long ago. Sort of. Fringe accounts say the chimera survived, just badly singed, and now lives near a tourist trap in western Turkey. She works part-time scaring goats and confusing hikers. Scholars politely ignore these reports. You pass a humble shepherd's hut, where a broken lyre leans against a wall and the air smells faintly of old olives. Orpheus lived here once, the poet-musician whose songs could charm even rocks. When his wife Eurydice died, he journeyed to the underworld, and played such beautiful music that Hades agreed to let her go. But of course, there was a catch. No turning back to look at her. Not once. Not even for a little peek. So, naturally, Orpheus looked and lost her forever. You sigh. Poor guy. You'd probably look too, especially if your partner were trailing behind in ghost form, sneezing softly. Modern scholars have long debated whether the Orpheus story is about love, trust, or that one person in every escape room group who ruins everything. Deeper into the hills, you pass the ruins of a temple to Demeter, goddess of the harvest. The earth here feels heavier, the wind slower. This is the story of Persephone, her daughter taken by Hades to the underworld, then partly returned. Why only partly? Pomegranate seeds. Turns out, eating food in the underworld is a big no-no. It locks you in like one of those emails you regret sending. Persephone ate 6 seeds. Some say it was an accident. Others think she did it on purpose. Maybe she wanted a seasonal timeshare in the afterlife. Historians still argue whether this myth is about agricultural cycles, female agency, or just ancient Greek parents being really bad at letting go. The seasons change around you in a blur. Spring blooming, summer swelling, autumn cooling, winter sighing. You realize you've just walked through a full year of Demeter's grief. It's oddly comforting, like a giant celestial mood swing with predictable phases. Suddenly, the trees thin, and you're standing at the edge of a cliff. Below, a storm churns over the sea. You feel a shift, a tug, and now the wind smells like salt and ozone. Poseidon is nearby. He emerges not with a roar, but with a shrug. His beard is tangled with seaweed, and his trident hums with lazy authority. God of the sea, earthquakes and horses. He's got big, I could flood your house, but I'm bored energy. You wave nervously. He burps. The ocean foams. Poseidon was never exactly subtle. He fathered sea monsters, created islands, and tried to seduce practically everything that moved, including, allegedly, a few things that didn't, like Medusa. Before she had snakes for hair, she was one of his ill-fated flings, inside a temple to Athena no less. Talk about poor location choices. You pull your cloak tighter. The wind is rising. Below, a ship sails too close to a rocky shore. You can almost hear Odysseus shouting at his crew. Ah yes, the wandering hero, another mortal caught in the gods' endless drama. But that tale spirals onward, and your feet are pulling you elsewhere. A faint humming draws you back inland. Asphodel blooms line the path, and the underworld creeps closer. But that's for later. For now, the mountain path rises, and you follow it slowly, the myths growing stranger with each step. The path narrows, carved now into the slope of an ominously quiet mountain. A low mist curls around your ankles like a curious cat, and your breath leaves visible puffs in the cooling air. You've come to a crossroads, figuratively and also quite literally. And there, looming in the twilight, stands Hecate, triple-formed goddess of witchcraft, crossroads, ghosts, and maybe that eerie feeling you get when the microwave beeps but no one's home. She holds her torches high, flickering with unnatural flame. You don't speak. She doesn't like small talk. But you nod, respectfully. She tilts her head. Somewhere behind her, a dog howls with 3 voices. You pretend not to notice. Historians still argue whether Hecate was a widely revered chthonic goddess or more of a niche pick for edgy midnight rituals. But there's no denying her vibe. Unsettling but quietly powerful. Like that one librarian who's definitely seen some things. You take the left-hand path, and it leads downward, always downward now, into tales darker than the sunny capers of Mount Olympus. Asphodel crunches beneath your feet. You're headed toward the underworld again. But this time, you're not following Orpheus or Persephone. You're drifting into the myth of Sisyphus. Ah yes, Sisyphus. The guy who cheated death, twice. First, he chained up Thanatos, the literal personification of death, which caused a minor bureaucratic nightmare. People stopped dying, battlefields got crowded, and Hades got grumpy. When death resumed, Sisyphus dodged it again with a clever lie about burial rites. In response, the gods sentenced him to an eternity of rolling a boulder up a hill, only for it to roll back down every time it neared the top. Basically, the original Greek treadmill. Some say this myth represents the futility of human labor. Others argue it's a cosmic joke. Either way, you step aside politely as Sisyphus shuffles past you, sweat-soaked and swearing softly. Just ahead, a stone altar glows faintly, and a figure in a long robe is drawing symbols in the dirt. That's Tiresias, the blind prophet of Thebes, famous for seeing the future and also, curiously, for having been both male and female during his lifetime. The story goes that he came across 2 snakes mating and struck them apart with his staff. The gods, unimpressed, turned him into a woman. Years later, he repeated the act and was turned back into a man. Why? Who knows? The gods didn't exactly follow OSHA guidelines. Tiresias later used this unique perspective in an argument between Hera and Zeus about who enjoys intimacy more, men or women. Tiresias sided with Zeus, which got him blinded by Hera but compensated by Zeus with prophetic vision. A classic Greek compromise. Lose an eye, gain second sight. You wave to Tiresias. He waves back without turning. Classic. A sudden gust of sulphurous wind ushers you to the tale of King Midas, he of the golden touch. You find yourself standing in a dry field, surrounded by statues of goats, vines, and one unfortunate donkey, all shimmering with unnatural luster. Midas had a simple wish, that everything he touched would turn to gold. The gods, ever literal, granted it. At first, it was all goblets and grapes. Then it got complicated. Bread, gold. Water, gold. His daughter, yeah, gold. Eventually, he begged for the curse to be lifted, which it was, after some ritual scrubbing in a river. That river, by the way, still sparkled oddly for centuries. Historians still argue whether the Midas myth critiques greed, divine pettiness, or just poor wording when making magical requests. Next to the Golden Grove, you spot a row of disheveled trees. One of them whispers your name. Or maybe it's just rustling. Either way, you've wandered into the story of Daphne and Apollo. It begins, as so many Greek tales do, with unwanted attention. Apollo, struck by one of Eros's arrows of love, becomes infatuated with Daphne, a nymph who is very much not into him. She flees. He chases. It's awkward. Eventually, she prays to her father, a river god, who transforms her into a laurel tree. Apollo, undeterred, declares the tree sacred. And just like that, ancient Greeks start wearing laurel wreaths at parties, battles, and awkward poetry readings. It's unclear whether Daphne was flattered by this development. Scholars still debate whether this myth is about female autonomy, divine obsession, or the origins of weird fashion trends. You continue through the laurel grove, where even the bark seems to shiver. The air tastes greener somehow. Just ahead, a figure sits beneath a twisted fig tree, twirling a spool of thread. Ah, the Fates. 3 sisters. Clotho, who spins the thread of life. Lachesis, who measures it. And Atropos, who cuts it. You nod solemnly. They don't return the gesture. They're busy, after all, untangling destinies, rerouting tragedies, maybe adjusting your own path right now. It's said not even Zeus could override the fates, though he probably tried, many times. A fringe theory suggests the sisters once shared a golden cat that determined the fate of small decisions, like whether someone would stub their toe on a Tuesday. This is, as you might guess, not widely accepted in academic circles. Behind the fates, the thread trails off into darkness. You follow it, boots silent on ancient moss, and feel the myths coiling tighter around you, ready to pull you into stranger and deeper tales yet to come. You step lightly now, guided by that shimmering thread left by the fates. It winds through the underbrush like a trail of moonlight, and before long, you find yourself on the edge of a quiet meadow. At its center stands a man with a bow, posture relaxed, but eyes locked onto something far in the distance. This is Orion, the hunter, the myth, the constellation. He's handsome, of course. Most of them are. But there's something slightly tragic about him. You can't tell if it's the faint outline of a scorpion lurking in the grass behind him, or just the general curse of being in Greek mythology. Now, Orion's story changes depending on which dusty scroll you pull it from. In one version, he boasts that he can kill every beast on Earth, which, spoiler, doesn't sit well with Gaia, the Earth goddess. She sends a giant scorpion to end his monster hunting career, and the two are placed in the sky forever, locked in a chase that plays out every night. In another version, he's tragically killed by Artemis, either by accident or at the trickery of her brother Apollo. Historians still argue whether Artemis truly loved him or was just really committed to her hunting buddy status. Either way, you tiptoe around the scorpion. A gentle rustling in the trees draws you forward into a story just as messy, that of Arachne. Once a humble weaver, Arachne boasted that her tapestries were better than those of the goddess Athena. You know where this is going. Athena disguised herself as an old woman to give Arachne a chance to walk back her sass. Arachne didn't. They had a loom-off. Arachne's tapestry was flawless, but oops, it depicted the gods behaving badly. Athena, very on brand, got mad and tore it up. Then she turned Arachne into a spider. A bit dramatic? Probably. But now every web you walk through in the dark is technically a work of divine punishment. Next time you're brushing one off your face, remember that. There's a fringe belief among some scholars that the tale of Arachne wasn't just a warning against arrogance, but also a sly nod to lost matriarchal weaving cults in pre-Hellenic societies. You'd bring it up to Athena, but she doesn't take criticism well. You step under a tree limb sparkling with webs and move forward. A cool breeze carries the scent of seawater, and just like that, you're standing on a rocky shore. A woman in tattered clothes clutches her child as a chariot roars past her, horses blazing. Welcome to the tragedy of Medea. Ah yes, Medea, not your average mythological footnote. She's a sorceress descended from the sun god Helios and falls hard for Jason, the golden fleece guy. She helps him cheat, kill, escape, and win. In return, He marries someone else. Classic. Medea's response? Well, let's just say it's a lot. We'll keep it PG, but suffice to say she makes sure Jason deeply regrets that wedding. Some versions say she flies away in a dragon-drawn chariot. Others, that she simply disappears, her legacy warped into that of a villain. Historians still argue whether Medea was intended as a cautionary tale about foreign women, unchecked emotion, or just bad boyfriends. Fringe scholars claim she was once a lunar goddess whose cult was erased by Olympian propaganda. You stay well out of her path. She's not one for second chances. Up a steep hill now, and you catch sight of something glittering. Golden wool draped across a tree, guarded by a very bored-looking dragon. The Golden Fleece. Again with Jason. Before the wedding drama, he'd embarked on the famous quest for the fleece, aided by a crew of Greek avengers known as the Argonauts. You'd think with Heracles, Orpheus, and Atalanta on board, things would go smoothly. Spoiler, they did not. One stop involved clashing rocks that smashed ships to bits. Another had harpies pooping on food. You heard that right. Even ancient epics had their low points. The fleece itself came from a flying ram that rescued 2 children and was sacrificed after the trip. Its hide became a magical MacGuffin hung in a sacred grove. Naturally, Jason was like, let's steal that. He gets the fleece, thanks, again, to Medea's spellwork, and books it. Most historians agree the quest reflects older myths of shamanic journeys and initiation rites. Others think it's just a flashy excuse for boat fights and soap opera romance. You wave to the dragon. It yawns smoke in your direction. The path becomes softer here, lined with moss and winding gently downhill into a quiet glade. At its center stands a man, confused and holding a lyre. His name is Orpheus, and he really just wanted to get his wife back. Eurydice died too young. Snakebite, of course. Orpheus, the world's greatest musician, decides to march into the underworld and demand a refund. And shockingly, it works. His music melts Hades' icy composure. Even Persephone looks misty-eyed. They agree to let Eurydice leave, on one condition. He must not look back at her until they reach the surface. Cue the world's most stressful walk. You know how this ends. At the very last moment, right before the light, he turns. Just a glance. Eurydice vanishes. Some say it was doubt. Others say he just loved her too much to resist. Historians still argue whether this story was ever meant to be about true love, or whether it was actually a tragic metaphor for the human inability to let go of the past. You walk alongside Orpheus now, but he doesn't see you. His music drifts in and out like mist. Above, constellations begin to flicker back into view. Orion again, now on the opposite side of the sky. The air grows thinner, the story's more fractured, but one thing's clear. You're nowhere near the end. You're standing at the edge of a cliff now, where wind howls through cracks in the ancient stone. The air tastes like salt and fate. There, crouched on a jagged rock, wings curled around her like a shroud, waits the Sphinx. Not the Egyptian one. This is the Greek model. She's all riddles and ruin, with the body of a lion, the wings of an eagle, and a face that could ruin your whole afternoon. Her eyes flick toward you. She's not interested in small talk. You remember the famous riddle, of course. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? You whisper the answer. Man. And she flinches as if stung. That was Oedipus's moment to shine. He solved the riddle and sent her plummeting off this very cliff. But it's the rest of his story that gets really awkward. Oedipus was left for dead as a baby due to a prophecy. Adopted, unaware of his birth parents, he grows up and, long myth short, kills his father and marries his mother. Oops. Classic Greek drama. When the truth finally hits, there's horror, self-inflicted blindness, and a whole new genre of uncomfortable family therapy. Historians still argue whether Oedipus's tale is one of fate versus free will, or if Sophocles just had some intense feelings about parental boundaries. You back away slowly from the Sphinx. She's humming something unsettling under her breath. Possibly a lullaby. Possibly a threat. Past a field of fallen olive trees, you find a throne room made entirely of smoke. Seated in it, dressed far too extravagantly for the underworld, is Hades. Now Hades gets a bad rap, but you're not sure it's earned. He's not the devil, just the god who drew the short stick when the cosmos was divided. Zeus got the sky, Poseidon the sea, and Hades, well, someone had to manage the dead. He rules the underworld with Persephone, queen of spring and half-time goth icon. Their story is bittersweet, involving a kidnap-turned-marriage and 6 pomegranate seeds. Depending on which version you're told, it's either tragic, romantic, or vaguely dietary. Scholars still argue whether Persephone was taken against her will or chose to stay. Fringe theories even suggest she had more power than she let on, a queen with one foot in both worlds. Hades doesn't look up as you pass, but you feel the weight of his presence. Kind of like taxes. Just beyond the mist rises a towering wall of bronze. Behind it, a labyrinth hums with lost stories, and at the entrance stands a boy with a thread, Theseus, another hero who gets slightly too much credit for what was basically a group project. The story? He volunteers to be sent into the labyrinth to kill the Minotaur, a creature that's half man, half bull, and full-time sad metaphor. But Theseus had help. Ariadne, daughter of the king, gives him a magic thread and some solid advice. He succeeds, escapes, and promptly ditches her on an island. Classy. The labyrinth itself was said to be designed by Daedalus, a mythical inventor with serious workplace regret. Historians still argue whether there ever was a real labyrinth in ancient Crete, or if it's just symbolic of power structures too complex to escape. You pause at the labyrinth's edge. You'd go in, but you just saw the thread snap. Probably for the best. Instead, you follow the echo of her wings up a steep incline. There, in the sun, 2 figures soar overhead, one climbing too high. Daedalus again, this time with his son Icarus. You know how this ends. They escape imprisonment on wax and feather wings. But Icarus, oh sweet impulsive Icarus, ignores the advice to stay low. He flies toward the sun, the wax melts, and down he goes. You shade your eyes, there's a splash far below. Historians still argue whether Icarus was a symbol of overreaching ambition, or just another cautionary tale for teens with poor impulse control. The breeze picks up, and a feather floats to your feet. Farther along the path, you spot a woman painting the sky. Literally, every color you see is dripping from her fingers. This is Iris, goddess of the rainbow. Not a major character, but essential nonetheless. She's the divine messenger before Hermes stole the show, gliding between heaven and earth on shimmering arcs of light. According to fringe myth, she could even travel to the deepest oceans and was trusted by the Olympians to deliver secrets too delicate for thunderbolts or ravens. You wave. She smiles faintly and flicks a drop of golden light toward you. It lands on your shoulder and instantly disappears. Now you're in a garden that feels a bit off. The flowers seem to whisper. The trees lean in too close. Circe lives here. She's another sorceress, this time with a flair for transformation. When Odysseus and his crew land on her island, she famously turns them into pigs. Eventually, she and Odysseus strike up a deal, a romance, and a surprisingly domestic stint. Modern scholars sometimes interpret Circe as an early feminist icon. Powerful, independent, and very tired of messy men showing up uninvited. Historians still argue whether her myth was meant to demonize powerful women or simply warn sailors to stay away from mysterious ladies with herb gardens. You smell time and something vaguely magical. Best to move on. A ship appears in the distance. Its sails tattered but proud. On board stands a man wrestling with his own legend, Odysseus, the original reluctant traveler. He took 10 years to return from a war that only lasted 10. On the way home, he fights a cyclops, dodges sirens, chats with ghosts, and seriously angers Poseidon. You catch a glimpse of the giant Polyphemus, his eyes still stinging from that hole. "Nobody stabbed me, trick." He grumbles something into the waves. Odysseus, meanwhile, clutches the helm, looking exhausted but determined. You wonder how much of his tale was ever meant to be believed. Historians still argue whether the Odyssey was pure myth or a patchwork of real Mediterranean misadventures woven into something greater than truth. As you walk past, he salutes you, then promptly steers into a storm cloud. You're not sure what's next, but it feels like the gods are watching. You wander down a slope of soft golden dust, each step muffled like walking through memory. Around you, the air hums with quiet drama. You're approaching Mount Olympus, except this isn't the marble and lightning headquarters the statues promised. It's more like a chaotic family reunion with gods who forgot to RSVP. At the center of it all is Zeus, thunderbolt in hand, beard perfectly windswept, expression somewhere between king of the cosmos and dad trying to fix the Wi-Fi. Zeus is the god of sky and thunder, king of the Olympians, and, let's be honest, serial meddler. No mortal or immortal seems safe from his attention. He's got quite the reputation for shapeshifting, usually to win over lovers, swans, bulls, golden rain, you name it. You try not to make eye contact. Historians still argue whether Zeus's many adventures were intended to reflect divine power or just explain weird family trees with mythological flair. Either way, his stories are both endless and eyebrow-raising. Beneath the thunder, a quieter force stirs. Hera. She sits near Zeus, but not with him, radiating dignity with a side of suppressed sighs. Goddess of marriage and queen of the gods, Hera has endured more than her share of indignities courtesy of her husband. But she's no passive victim. Her retributions are legendary. Io, Semele, Leto. You remember the names because they all suffered Hera's wrath in myth after Zeus's attentions fell upon them. Still, she remains powerful, commanding, and somehow sympathetic in her frustration. Some fringe scholars even argue she wasn't originally married to Zeus in older myths, but added later to tie myths together into a cosmic soap opera. A peacock struts past. You nod respectfully. Moving away from Mount Olympus, possibly before the next lightning bolt, you step into the light cast by a golden chariot. Here comes Apollo. Everything about him glows, from his sun-disk crown to the smugness of someone who plays both harp and plague. He's the god of music, prophecy, healing, and when he's in a mood, archery and divine vengeance. He greets you with a lyrical quip and strums an invisible lyre. You're not sure if you're flattered or being hexed with a ballad about bad posture. Apollo had a twin, Artemis, and their stories, though often entwined, reflect opposite energies. He was sunlight and song. She was moonlight and silence. But Apollo's more complicated than his polished image suggests. Remember the time he flayed a satyr alive for losing a music contest? Yeah, not exactly gentle. Historians still argue whether Apollo's darker tales reflect an evolution from earlier, more primal deities, more shadow than shine. Just as his music starts to feel too perfect, it's interrupted by a shimmer of silver and the crack of a bowstring. Artemis has arrived. She moves like a ghost through a forest you didn't notice until now. Goddess of the hunt, the moon, and all things wild. She's fierce, independent, and generally allergic to mortal nonsense. A stag darts by. She doesn't blink. Though she's often portrayed as chaste, Artemis's myths pulse with tension, like the tale of Actaeon, who stumbled upon her bathing and was promptly turned into a stag and hunted by his own dogs. You might want to look at your feet very carefully. Fringe versions of her stories paint Artemis as more than just protector of maidens, sometimes as a fertility goddess, other times as a fierce guardian of sacred boundaries between worlds. She doesn't speak. She just melts into the trees, leaving the faint scent of pine and rebellion. The trees thin and suddenly, you're in a garden so symmetrical it's suspicious. Ivy climbs in perfect spirals, and not a single flower dares to bloom off rhythm. This is Demeter's domain. She's the goddess of agriculture, harvest, and maternal wrath. When her daughter Persephone was taken by Hades, Demeter didn't just cry. She shut down the entire growing season. Crops withered. Famine spread. The world, quite literally, stopped. Only when Persephone was allowed to return part-time did spring bloom again. And even now, every winter, Demeter grieves. Historians still argue whether this myth reflects early agricultural cycles or is a coded tale of women's rights and seasonal mystery cults. You reach out to touch a sheaf of wheat, and it curls gently away, as if remembering. The warmth fades, replaced by something colder, darker. Flickering torchlight on black stone. Standing between those torches is a Hecate, goddess of magic, crossroads, and ghosts. She doesn't get the spotlight often, but here, at night, her presence is impossible to ignore. She was said to guide Persephone through the underworld, carrying torches to light the path between death and rebirth. You feel a whisper at your ear, but no breath. Just the echo of choices not taken. She's often pictured with three faces, seeing past, present, and future simultaneously. Or perhaps she simply sees through you. Fringe cults worshipped Hecate as the guardian of a household thresholds, protector of witches, and bringer of dreams both cryptic and terrible. You're not sure whether to bow or bolt. She disappears before you can decide. You stumble into a clearing and find yourself face to face with a goat-legged figure blowing on a reed flute. It's somehow both charming and unsettling. Pan, god of the wild, of shepherds, of sudden irrational fear. Yes, that's where panic comes from. He's half goat, half man, and fully indifferent to social norms. He grins and winks. His music rolls over you like a breeze that forgot where it was going. In one myth, he chased a nymph named Syrinx, who turned into reeds to escape him. Pan made a flute from them. Romantic? Creepy? Historians still argue whether Pan represented untamed nature or simply acted as a warning against too much wine and not enough boundaries. You hear laughter in the woods. Probably nymphs. Possibly something else. Either way, you're leaving. Ahead, nestled in a misty alcove, is a mirror. It ripples. A figure steps through. Tall, armored, eyes blazing with strategy and a hint of war. Athena, goddess of wisdom, war, and arts and crafts. A strange mix, but somehow it works. She sprang fully formed from Zeus's head, which tells you everything you need to know about divine headaches. Athena doesn't wage war like Ares. She plans, calculates, and then strikes. She once turned Arachne, a talented weaver who dared outshine her, into a spider. That's one way to handle criticism. Scholars still argue whether Athena's myths reflect patriarchal control over female wisdom or ancient respect for intelligence and craft. She looks at you now, not unkindly, but like she's solving a puzzle you didn't know you were part of. You nod politely and back away. You're getting good at that. As you slip away from Athena's gaze, your feet echo faintly on cold stone, and the air thickens with something heavier than mist. You descend a slope with no bottom in sight, but you don't fall. You glide, as if the laws of physics are taking a break. You're entering the underworld, and waiting at the edge of this dark domain is the Hades himself. No horns, no flames. Just a solemn shadowed figure with eyes like quiet tombs and a crown made of obsidian. He's not the devil, not really. Hades is the god of the dead. Keeper of balance, not bringer of doom. He doesn't cause death, he just runs the place. Hades is often misunderstood, painted as some kind of villain because he governs where people go when they're done being people. But his myths, especially the one with Persephone, reveal a more complicated character. He takes her, yes, but in many versions he's not cruel, just uninvited. Historians still argue whether the story of Hades and Persephone was a metaphor for marriage in ancient Greek society or a symbolic explanation of seasonal cycles. Possibly both. Possibly neither. possibly just the Greeks working through their feelings about winter. As you walk past him, you see a faint smile flicker across his lips. Maybe it's a warning. Maybe he knows how the story ends. Maybe he's just amused that you're still going. Suddenly, you hear a growl. Not close, but not far enough. Cerberus, the three-headed dog, guardian of the underworld, drools in stereo and watches you with eyes like smoldering coal. Each head seems to judge you in a different way. One skeptical, one hungry, one just a little bored. You remember that fringe theory suggesting Cerberus's three heads represent the past, present, and future. Or maybe birth, life, and death. Or maybe the Greeks just really liked complicated pets. You throw an imaginary stick. All three heads look at it. None of them chase it. They're not amateurs. You tiptoe past, promising to never speak ill of guard dogs again. Further into the gloom, a river gurgles. Not with water, but with memory. This is the river Lethe. One sip, and you forget everything. Your name, your past. Maybe even what you came here for. The souls around you drink freely, their eyes going blank with peace or loss, you can't tell. A scholarly debate once suggested that drinking from Lethe before reincarnation symbolized the soul's cleansing. Others argue it was just an ancient explanation for déjà vu, or forgetting why you walked into a room. You resist the temptation to drink, even as a ghostly waiter offers you a Lethe teeny. Not tonight. A boat pulls up silently beside you. No engine, no oars. Just a man in a hood, hand outstretched. Not for help, but for payment. Charon, the ferryman of the dead. His boat glides on the Styx and Acheron alike, depending on the myth, and his rates are always the same. 1 coin, placed under the tongue at burial. You fumble in your pocket, find a breath mint, and hope he's feeling generous. He squints, accepts it. You exhale. The boat creaks as you cross the river, and for a moment, everything is still, as if the world is holding its breath between life and death. You feel your heart beat slow, not in fear, but in rhythm with the silence. When you dock on the other side, there are judges waiting. 3 of them, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. They sit behind what looks like the ancient version of a folding table, squinting over your life's paperwork. You try not to sweat. Each judge covers different regions of souls, from Europe to Asia to the Isles of the Blessed. If your soul was particularly shiny, you'd get sent there, to lounge eternally with the worthy. If not, well, fields of asphodel await, eternally grey, eternally average. Historians still argue whether this setup reflected real Greek ideas of justice or was just a celestial DMV. Either way, you're glad it's not your turn. A side passage draws you in, lit by flickering torches and lined with stories carved in stone. Here lives Persephone. She isn't just Hades' wife. She's the goddess of spring, of rebirth, of everything green and growing and returning. But here, in her winter half of the year, she reigns as queen of the underworld. No flower crown, no butterflies, just iron grace and calm authority. You half expect her to smile. Instead, she places a pomegranate seed in your palm. You don't eat it. She nods, as if she expected that. The myth of Persephone eating the fruit and thus being bound to Hades for part of each year is one of the most famous and hotly debated. Did she eat willingly? Was it a trap? Was she tricked? Historians still argue, sometimes heatedly, usually over coffee. You walk out of her chamber feeling oddly hopeful. Even here, among the dead, she blooms. Back on the surface, the air feels sharp and bright. Too bright. You blink and find yourself in a room where every surface is mirrored. Reflections of reflections. Standing at the center is Narcissus, a beautiful youth caught in the eternal act of admiring himself in a pool of water. In some myths, he turns into a flower. In others, he simply fades from existence, never able to look away from his own image. Modern interpretations see Narcissus as a warning against vanity. Others argue it's about identity, about the tension between the self we see and the self we are. And in a world of selfies and subtle filters, you wonder if the myth knew more than it let on. You shift your gaze, don't get stuck. A breeze wafts in, carrying the scent of the sea and something stranger. You follow it to the edge of the world, where chaos rolls and crashes like waves that forgot how to end. There stands a figure so odd you nearly miss him. Proteus, the old man of the sea. Not powerful, not glamorous, just slippery, literally. He can change into anything to avoid answering questions. Fire, water, a lion, even a tree. To get truth from him, you must grab him and hold on until he stops transforming. Kind of like trying to follow your dreams in your 30s. Historians still argue whether Proteus was a minor sea deity or a fading memory of some pre-Olympian god. Either way, he embodies the frustration of knowledge just out of reach. He eyes you, shifts into a breeze, then a squid, then a shrug. You take the hint. Before the sea foam settles from Proteus's vanishing act, you hear laughter, sharp, cold, and utterly chaotic. You turn to find a chariot being pulled by serpents and driven by a woman with hair that seems to hiss in its own language. Eris, goddess of strife. You probably weren't expecting her to show up in a bedtime story, but here she is, smiling like someone who just unsent a spicy text and now wants to watch it all burn. She tosses a golden apple into the air. It spins, gleaming in the low light, and you notice the inscription. To the fairest. Oh no, you know this one. That apple is about to cause the Trojan War. You watch as 3 towering goddesses appear, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, all with very different ideas about what fairest means. They each turn to you. You panic. You are not Paris of Troy. You're in pajamas and barely awake. Still, you're asked to judge. Hera offers you power. Athena offers wisdom. Aphrodite offers love. Classic. Historians still argue whether this myth was meant to explain vanity, fate, or just justify a very long war over a very pretty woman. One fringe theory even suggests the whole thing was invented to spice up wedding speeches. You politely decline to choose. The goddesses look mildly insulted, but let you go. Eris, of course, is thrilled. You walk away fast. The terrain shifts again, now cracking underfoot like dry parchment. You step onto Mount Olympus. Not metaphorically, literally, you're there, and it's surprisingly quiet. No clouds or thunder, just tall columns and the scent of incense. You peek into a courtyard and see a man with a thunderbolt-shaped eyebrow furrow. Zeus, the king of gods, is not throwing lightning bolts right now. He's pacing, muttering something about mortals being ungrateful again. You hide behind a marble statue, because the last thing you need is to get caught in one of his mood swings. He's not just the storm god, he's also the god of law, order, and hospitality. A walking contradiction with a lightning rod. His myths often read like reality TV. Dramatic, petty, full of affairs and shocking plot twists. One mainstream fact: ancient Greeks believed thunder was the sound of Zeus speaking, or sneezing. Scholars are divided. You notice an eagle watching you closely. It might be Zeus's, or just a really nosy bird. Either way, you keep moving. Past him, in a sun-drenched corner of Olympus, is a hearth. Simple, warm, and at its center is Hestia, the goddess of the home, of the flame that never goes out. She's not flashy. She doesn't chase wars or lovers. She just keeps things going. Every home had a shrine to her, every city a sacred fire. As sacred, you sit beside her for a moment, and she offers you something no other god has: quiet. Historians still argue why Hestia was eventually pushed out of the Olympian 12 in favor of Dionysus. Was it politics? Popularity? The need for a party god over a domestic one? Whatever the reason, she doesn't seem to mind. She watches the flame and smiles. You thank her softly and leave. a little warmer inside. Now you're in a vineyard. Grapes hang heavy on the vines. Laughter echoes from the distance. Someone is singing off key. You don't even need to see him to know who it is. Dionysus, god of wine, madness, theater, and questionable decisions. He's the only Olympian who was born mortal and became divine, and it shows. He greets you with a dramatic bow and immediately offers you a goblet of something that smells like bad ideas. You decline. He shrugs and downs it himself. Behind him, Maenads twirl with wild eyes and ivy in their hair. Satyrs play flutes too loud and too fast. It's a party that feels like it could tip into chaos any second. Dionysus's myths are full of contradiction. Pleasure and punishment, celebration and vengeance. Historians still argue whether he was imported from the East or grew from local Greek cults. Either way, his worship was intense. You make your exit while your dignity's intact. From the noise, you stumble into silence again. A forge glows in the distance, hammer striking metal with comforting regularity. Hephaestus, the god of fire and craft, of smithing and invention. You see him bent over an anvil, creating something you can't name. It glows blue, hums softly, maybe alive. He doesn't notice you at first. His world is a heat and precision. He's not like the other gods. He limps, he works. He creates rather than destroys. The myths aren't always kind to him. Some mock his appearance, others marvel at his genius. Fringe theories suggest he represents the quiet resilience of the laboring class in a world run by drama kings and storm queens. He finally looks up, nods at you, then turns back to his work. That nod feels like a blessing. You leave the forge carrying the smell of smoke and steel. And now your path turns upward again. You climb until the air is thin. The stars closer. You're nearing the domain of Apollo, god of the sun, prophecy, music, and medicine. Basically the resume of someone who definitely brings an acoustic guitar to parties. He strums a lyre as you approach, and the music makes your bones vibrate like tuning forks. It's beautiful, overwhelming, a little annoying, if you're honest. Apollo is both light and logic, a divine overachiever. His oracle at Delphi was famous across the ancient world. People traveled weeks to ask vague questions and get even vaguer answers. Historians still argue whether those cryptic prophecies were poetic genius or just really confident guesswork. Fringe theories blame volcanic gases. He smiles, dazzlingly, and offers you a riddle. You respond with a shrug. He laughs like you passed a test you didn't know you were taking. You back away slowly and trip over a snake. Not just any snake, Python, guardian of Delphi. Apollo's myth includes slaying this enormous serpent to claim the oracle as his own. You're glad the snake today is more symbolic than literal, or so you hope. You dust yourself off and glance to the moonlit horizon. You've met a lot of gods, but the one who's probably watching you most closely, Artemis. She doesn't step into view. She stays just beyond reach. You feel her presence in the rustle of trees, the hush of a hidden bowstring, goddess of the hunt, of wild places, of moonlight. She's fierce and free and famously uninterested in marriage. Her myths often involve transformations. Women turned into animals to escape danger, or lovers punished for overstepping. She is mercy and judgment, protector and predator. Some scholars suggest Artemis evolved from much older nature deities, woven into the Olympian 12 to keep the wildness in balance. You bow. She says nothing, just nods from the shadows, and just like that, she's gone. You keep walking. As you leave Artemis's moonlit presence, something shifts beneath your feet. The earth feels heavier, denser, like the very air is mourning. You descend now, the terrain sloping downward, away from light and laughter, toward the place no one talks about unless they have to, the underworld. Not a place you typically want to visit before bed, but here you are. You walk through a cave mouth framed by skeletal olive trees. The temperature drops sharply. Your breath fogs, and the silence presses against your eardrums. A Three-headed dog, not barking, just watching, lets you pass with a slow blink. Cerberus. He's less terrifying than expected, more like a very tired intern. You step across the river Styx, not by boat, but across a natural stone bridge slick with moss. Somewhere, Charon the ferryman is on a smoke break. Ahead stands Hades, god of the dead, ruler of the underworld, and, according to about 70% of myths, the quiet brother who didn't ask for any of this. He's not evil, just extremely good at boundaries. You've got to respect that. He's standing beside a withered tree that blooms with one single red flower, pomegranate, and standing next to him, Persephone, queen of the underworld, goddess of spring, dual citizen of life and death. Her gaze meets yours, calm and curious. She doesn't speak, but something about her smile tells you she's fully in control of her story. Even if it's often told like a kidnapping drama, historians still argue whether Persephone's descent and return were symbolic rituals tied to agricultural cycles or feminist allegories retrofitted into an old mythos. Fringe theories suggest it was ancient branding for seasonal produce markets. Yes, really, the two of them seem oddly peaceful together. Not in love necessarily, but aligned, equal. You nod, and Hades returns it with a faint gesture. Not a greeting, not a farewell, just an understanding. You walk on. The underworld isn't just gloom. There are fields, rivers, shadows of heroes and nobodies alike. You pass the Elysian fields, where souls of virtue dwell. It looks suspiciously like a very well-funded retirement community. You half expect someone to offer you ambrosia-flavored pudding. Farther down you hear arguments, intense ones. A man shouting in iambic pentameter. You peek around a corner and spot Orpheus, the mythic musician who tried to rescue his wife, Eurydice, from death using only the power of music and extremely poor impulse control. He almost made it, almost. That word echoes through this place, almost. His lyre lies broken now. He hums to himself and walks in circles. You consider offering him a Bluetooth speaker, but the moment passes. Above you, faintly, daylight filters down. You start climbing. The weight of the underworld sloughs off slowly, like dried clay cracking from your boots. You emerge blinking into daylight and find yourself on a high cliff overlooking a sparkling sea. There's a breeze that smells of salt and storytelling. Poseidon is waiting, god of the sea, earthquakes, and horses. Yes, horses. He's got range. His trident is embedded in a stone beside him, and he looks every bit the maritime dad who insists on deep-sea fishing vacations even when no one asked. His myths are choppy waters. Sometimes he's helpful, other times he's casually destructive, like a toddler with a squirt gun and zero consequences. You remember the story of how he competed with Athena to become the patron deity of Athens. He struck the ground and produced a saltwater spring. She offered an olive tree. The people chose the tree. Poseidon has never gotten over it. Historians still argue whether this myth reflects a historical shift from sea power to agriculture, or just a civic marketing campaign. Fringe scholars say the olive tree was a metaphor for renewable exports. You make a mental note to never underestimate the symbolism of snacks. Poseidon doesn't speak. He simply watches the waves. You think you see something massive moving beneath the surface. An ancient sea beast, maybe. Or just your imagination stretching before bedtime. You nod to him and continue inland. Fields open up before you. Wheat sways gently in the breeze, and the sound of bees hums in the distance. It feels human. Demeter is here, goddess of the harvest, of grain and growth, and maternal vengeance. She's kneeling in the dirt, coaxing green shoots from the soil with her fingertips. She looks up and greets you softly, kindly. There's a calm power in her eyes. This is a goddess who fed a world and nearly starved it in grief. You recall how she searched endlessly for Persephone after her daughter was taken by Hades. How she wandered the world, mourning, while the crops withered. Her grief was an ecological event. Mainstream scholars agree that the Eleusinian mysteries, ceremonies in her honor, were central to Greek religion. But what exactly happened in those rites? Well, historians still argue. Some say it was symbolic rebirth, others think it involves psychedelic barley. Fringe theory? Time-traveling vegans, don't ask. Demeter offers you a handful of wheat. You accept. And suddenly everything feels just a bit more grounded. You move on, through the grove, into a clearing, where you find Hermes, wearing sandals with wings and looking like he's late for a Zoom meeting. Messenger god, patron of travelers, thieves, and athletes. He grins as though you've been friends forever. He offers you a handshake, then steals your pen while distracting you with a coin trick. Classic Hermes. He's everywhere and nowhere, guiding souls to the underworld, delivering messages for Zeus, inventing music. He once made a lyre out of a turtle shell, because why not? One fringe claim suggests Hermes was originally a fertility god who evolved into something sleeker, more corporate. You walk with him a while. He tells you stories, some of which might be lies. He winks often. And then, just like that, he's gone. You glance around and realize you're suddenly in a dimly lit chamber lined with mirrors. A woman stares back at you. Not from the mirror, but beside it. Aphrodite, goddess of love, beauty, and seafoam-related entrances. She tilts her head, appraising you like you're the subject of a painting she hasn't decided whether to keep. Her presence is overwhelming. You feel attractive and insecure all at once. Like you just posted a selfie and instantly regretted it. Her myths are full of contradiction. Love and betrayal, war and peace, power disguised as passivity. She's said to have sparked the Trojan War with that whole golden apple incident. But here now she seems tired of it. She touches a mirror, and it shows you moments, glimpses of people falling in and out of love. All imperfect, all beautiful. Historians still argue whether she was originally a Near Eastern goddess adapted by the Greeks, or a homegrown deity with imported flair. Fringe theories say she was invented by coastal towns to justify beach nudity. She smiles faintly, then disappears in a shimmer. You're left with the silence of your own reflection, and a strange comfort in knowing even gods are messy. You step away from the mirror, the echo of Aphrodite's perfume still lingering in your thoughts. Rose water and ambition. And as you round the corner of your mind, the sky begins to pulse with a reddish hue. The kind of glow that makes you brace yourself before knowing why. Ares is here, god of war. Not strategy, not justice, just war. He's pacing, always pacing, broad-shouldered, armored, a perpetual scowl curling under his bronze helm. The kind of guy who brings a sword to a poetry reading and still thinks he won, and yet he's not shouting, not posturing. He sees you and just nods. There's a weariness to him that doesn't often get told in the myths. You remember how even the Greeks didn't exactly like Ares. Unlike Athena, who made war look noble and calculated, Ares represented the chaos, the panic, the bloodlust, the part of battle where people forget why they started fighting in the first place. Historians still argue whether Ares' unpopularity in Athens was political or just cultural. One fringe theory claims he was based on older Thracian deities, imported and disliked like a bad house guest who never left. And yet Ares was worshipped, feared, but still worshipped. Because deep down, ancient people knew. Sometimes violence wasn't clean or righteous. Sometimes it was just inevitable. He walks beside you for a few steps, breathing heavily, as though the weight of centuries of warfare hangs from his shoulders. Then he turns and vanishes into dust, like a battlefield clearing after the last soldier falls. And from that dust rises someone far more composed. Athena, not a whisper of chaos. She stands in shining armor, helm tucked under her arm, and the sharpness of her gaze could slice marble. She does not smile, but you sense approval. She was born from Zeus's head, literally. One of the more painful childbirth stories in mythology. And no, there was no epidural involved. She's the goddess of wisdom, justice, handicrafts, and cool heads under pressure. The kind of person who could defeat you in battle and teach you embroidery right after. You walk with her through a hall of statues, heroes she's guided, cities she's protected, owls perched quietly like judges above. Mainstream historians agree that Athena represented idealized civic virtue in Greek culture. Reason, balance, intellect. But even so, some myths show her delivering harsh punishments. Arachne, for instance, who dared to outweave her. Let's just say it didn't end in a gift card. Fringe theory? Some say Athena was originally a weather goddess or a warrior queen from an earlier matriarchal society, later absorbed into patriarchal Olympus PR. You're not sure. But what you do know is that being in her presence feels clarifying. Like drinking ice water after a long nap. She lifts a finger and points upward, and just like that, you're standing under a sky of stars. So many stars it makes you feel like a breadcrumb on a banquet table. You spot constellations, Orion, Pegasus, and... wait, that one's not in your app. Apollo is here, golden, radiant, unnecessarily symmetrical. He's playing a lyre, not because he wants to impress you, but because he knows he's impressive. The song is oddly catchy. You're annoyed to find yourself humming along. God of music, healing, prophecy, and the sun. Basically the overachiever in the Divine Family group chat. You suspect he uses too many sun emojis. His myths stretch wide, slaying the Python at Delphi, mentoring heroes, giving questionable prophecies through the oracle, and once getting turned into a mortal as punishment for something. Honestly, the gods were always being grounded. Historians still argue whether Apollo's worship was native or borrowed from Eastern cultures. There are strong parallels to Near Eastern solar deities. Fringe scholars, they're convinced Apollo was a celestial hologram projected by aliens who appreciated Greek music. You stay a moment longer, basking in the glow. Not just sunlight, but clarity, structure, form. The world makes sense when Apollo plays, but not everything stays so tidy. The light bends, and suddenly you are standing in a theater. A mask stares at you, smiling, frowning, both, neither. And Dionysus is reclining in the front row, god of wine, madness, ecstasy, and theater. The divine wild card. 1 minute he's offering you a drink. The next, you're in a trance dance surrounded by ivy and illusions. He raises a goblet and salutes you, curls wild around his temples. A panther lounges beside him like a house cat that eats intruders. Dionysus's myths are stories of transformation. Mortals becoming divine, cities dissolving into euphoria, reality shifting like waves in a wine cup. His followers, the Maenads, were famous for losing themselves to divine frenzy, sometimes joyful, sometimes messy. Mainstream history places Dionysus among the last Olympians added to the canon. Perhaps a foreign god assimilated late. Historians still argue whether he was originally a fertility deity, a shamanic figure, or simply the personification of too many festival weekends in a row. Fringe theory. Some believe Dionysus never existed. He was a metaphor for collective human emotion. Try telling that to the guy next to you who just turned into a dolphin. It's fine. He seems happy. Dionysus invites you to stay, to dance, to drink. But gently you decline. Not out of fear, out of timing, because you've met nearly everyone now, and the sky has changed again. It's not day, it's not night, it's dreamlight. The color of stories being rewritten as you speak them. The stars above now shimmer like distant harp strings, each one humming softly with unfinished stories. And standing right in the quiet center of it all, facing you with a sly, unreadable smile, is Hermes, messenger god, trickster, boundary crosser, the guy who could sweet talk you out of your wallet and return it full of olives instead of cash. He's in motion even when he's still, sandals laced with golden wings, caduceus twirling lazily in one hand. His eyes glitter with the kind of intelligence that always feels 3 jokes ahead of everyone else in the room. You try to pin down what exactly he does. He was the patron of travelers, thieves, merchants, athletes, and midwives. Yes, midwives. Hermes had range. Historians still argue whether Hermes began as a pastoral deity, a trade symbol, or a psychopomp imported from earlier Indo-European myth. His presence shows up on ancient Greek pottery and in the margins of very old jokes about sheep theft. One fringe theory suggests Hermes was a personification of the horizon, always moving, never quite reachable, always watching both sides of the line. Another says he invented the alphabet on a dare. What's certain is this: you trust him, even though you know you probably shouldn't. He gestures casually toward the darkness behind him, and like flipping a page, you're there. The underworld. Not fire and brimstone, no shrieking, just stillness. You tread down a stone slope lined with asphodel flowers, greyish, whispering softly when you pass. The air here tastes like old paper and candle ash, and at the far end, a throne carved from shadow and polished bone. Hades. He's not scary in the way you expected. No pitchfork, no cackling. Just a tired, dignified figure in a black robe, holding court among the souls of the dead with a bored sort of grace. He meets your eyes, not cold, not cruel, just eternal. Like someone who has seen too much and no longer bothers to raise his voice. Mainstream historians have long noted that Hades wasn't seen as evil in Greek religion, just inevitable. He didn't cause death, he managed the mess after. A divine janitor with impeccable records. And yet, Hades rarely gets temples. People didn't really pray to him. He was feared through omission, whispered about instead of invoked. One quirky myth insists Hades once tried stand-up comedy to win Persephone's heart. Another claims he offered heroes cryptic advice in dreams, disguised as a stranger. Fringe theorists, because of course they exist, say the Greeks confused Hades with a much older agricultural deity, that he was originally linked to the earth's cycles and fertility before the afterlife. Branding took over. You wonder about that as you watch him, because despite the gloom, there's growth here. Persephone walks by, trailing tiny green shoots with her steps. Even in death, there are rhythms. Even in endings, movement. And then, that same movement returns. You are rising, faster now, like breath catching after a long silence. And suddenly, you're in a storm, a literal one this time. The winds tear sideways, lightning rips across the sky, and thunder rolls like marble crashing through clouds. Standing in the center of it, gripping a thunderbolt as casually as some people hold umbrellas, Zeus, the big guy, king of the gods, lover of many, shouter of oaths, wielder of smiting. He's barefoot on a jagged rock that somehow hasn't blown away, beard wild like a mountain goat just got promoted, eyes electric. He doesn't say anything. He booms. Every word he utters vibrates your ribs like a subwoofer in a chariot. Zeus gets a lot of airtime in the myths. Too much, some say. Father of gods and men, sure, but also father of way too many demigods. Honestly, the family tree looks like a bramble bush after a windstorm. Mainstream historians generally agree that Zeus's rise reflected the consolidation of local sky gods across Greek territories, a kind of divine merger for thunder-based brand identity. And yes, historians still argue whether his many affairs were cautionary tales, metaphors for power, or just very bad storytelling with very good lightning effects, a fun tidbit. In some fringe versions of the myths, Zeus had to reapply for his role as king every few centuries. Divine democracy? Or just very persistent rival gods? He raises his hand, not in threat, but in acknowledgement. You nod. not in reverence, but in recognition. This whole pantheon, all the chaos, order, love, spite, cleverness, violence, it's not about being gods really. It's about being human enough to stay interesting for thousands of years. And as the storm begins to settle, you feel a shift in the ground beneath you. Softness. The world doesn't fall away. It fades. The myths don't end, they quiet. You drift now past minor gods and demigods. Pan is somewhere playing pipes to no one in particular. The Hesperides doze beside their golden apples. A lonely satyr practices dance steps he'll probably forget by sunrise. You walk gently past them, like sneaking through a theater backstage after closing night. The props are scattered, the lights dimmed, but the magic lingers. And above you, just before everything settles into dream, you hear the faintest whisper. It isn't Zeus. It's the stories themselves, still spinning, still reaching, still waiting for someone like you to listen. Somewhere between thunder and silence, you land softly in a flickering grove, twilight clinging to twisted tree trunks, leaves rustling like parchment. And in the center, seated calmly on a stone bench, is a woman with a torch in one hand and the night itself coiled like smoke in the other. Hecate. You can tell immediately she's different. Not aloof like Athena, not indulgent like Dionysus. She watches you with 3 sets of eyes. No, wait. She becomes 3 women as you blink. Maiden, mother, and crone. All of them you, all of them not. She doesn't speak, but you understand her perfectly. She is the goddess of boundaries, of crossroads, of things that flicker in the in-between. Ghosts, moonlight, dreams, herbal medicine, dogs barking at midnight for no reason at all. Historians still argue whether Hecate was originally a foreign import into the Greek pantheon, possibly from Anatolia, or a deeply native deity absorbed from older pre-Olympian cults. She was never quite at home on Mount Olympus. Too weird, too shadowy, too many torches, one mainstream fact. Hecate was honored at household doorways, especially during the dark moon, when the veil between worlds supposedly thinned. People left offerings, eggs, garlic, honey cakes, at 3-way crossroads, where she could slip between realities unnoticed. A fringe theory claims she taught the first necromancer how to use poppy seeds to coax spirits into teacups. Another suggests she was the original guide for Persephone, not Hermes, a kind of divine babysitter for underworld commutes. You watch her torch flicker brighter, not to illuminate, but to reveal. Layers of myth curled under layers of memory. She nods, and the ground beneath you opens like an ancient trapdoor, creaking slowly. And you fall again, but this time upward, into sun-drenched marble, into peacock feathers and golden sandals, into the smell of roses and simmering jealousy. Welcome to Hera's domain. She stands straight-backed, chin lifted, expression stony enough to chip an amphora. Regal, powerful, and perpetually underappreciated. Queen of the gods, goddess of marriage and childbirth, wife of Zeus, and a woman constantly described by men who didn't ask how she felt about it. You feel the weight of her crown before she even speaks. Mainstream mythology often paints her as vindictive, especially towards Zeus's endless side quests in divine dating. But historians still argue whether Hera's jealousy was a patriarchal misread of her deeper function, maintaining divine order, guarding sacred vows, demanding accountability in a world built on chaos. A quirky tidbit. Hera had her own secret garden of magical plants, some of which only bloomed during thunderstorms. One tale insists she created the Milky Way by slapping a baby off her breast. Genuinely not kidding. And neither was the sculptor who carved it. And in some fringe versions, Hera was the sky, predating Zeus, swallowing stars and dreams before language even formed. You walk with her now through her temple. Columns towering, doves flitting between open windows. Every footstep echoes with power restrained, respect demanded, and a quiet ache that no one ever asked what she wanted. You pause, and she brushes a hand across your shoulder. almost motherly, almost. And then she turns away. As you pass the temple's threshold, the scene ripples again. The temperature drops, the torches sputter, and you're suddenly underwater. Well, not wet exactly, more like drenched in silence. Welcome to the sea, or more precisely, to Poseidon's court. He is massive, of course. Shoulders like ship hulls, beard streaked with salt and seaweed, holding a trident that seems to pulse with tectonic pressure. He watches you like a storm might, waiting to decide if it should ruin your day. Poseidon, god of the sea, earthquakes, horses, don't ask, and aquatic grudges. You float beside him, gravity gone, but dignity still very much in the room. Mainstream historical fact. Greek sailors always poured out a little wine before setting sail, hoping Poseidon would look the other way if they hit a storm. His name was invoked constantly in seafaring rituals and oaths. Fringe belief? Poseidon created dolphins by sneezing. Or maybe he didn't. Historians still argue whether he was worshipped more fervently on coastal regions because he was seen as a protector, or as a volatile landlord whose mood you had to pay off. One curious myth says he once fell in love with a wave. Just a wave. Married it in secret. The ceremony involves 6 sea nymphs, a kelp bouquet, and a talking crab officiant. Poseidon leans close now. His eyes swirl with oceans you've never seen. And then, you're rising again, higher and higher, back toward land, through olive groves and dusty roads, toward the hearth. The smoke curls and the warmth returns. The hearth crackles before you even see it. Warm, steady, unassuming. You sit cross-legged on smooth stone, toes warmed by glowing embers that smell faintly of cedar. No thunder, no tridents, no peacocks glaring at you from temple pillars. Just the comfort of home. And Hestia. She doesn't tower like Zeus or sparkle like Aphrodite. She doesn't hunt wild boars or smite cities into obedience. She tends the fire. That's it. And that's everything. Hestia, goddess of the hearth and domestic life. The very first Olympian. And in some stories, the very first to leave Olympus to make room for Dionysus. Quietly. Without fanfare. Because someone had to keep the world's homes from collapsing. You watch her feed the flames with a small pine cone, then settle down beside you like a favorite aunt, who always smells like bread and cinnamon. Mainstream historical fact. Every city-state in ancient Greece kept a public hearth in her honor. It was more than symbolic. Fire was life, warmth, protection from the night. When new colonies were founded, they carried coals from the mother city's hearth to light their new one. Fringe belief? Some cults whispered that Hestia could walk between homes unseen, passing through keyholes like smoke. One rural village supposedly left out a tiny pair of sandals on the hearth each night, just in case she wanted to stretch her legs. And historians still argue whether Hestia's absence from so many dramatic myths means she was too sacred to fictionalize, or just ignored by the bard bros in favor of more chaotic gods. You lean into the warmth, and she pats your hand, then vanishes into the coals, content, quiet, still tending. The scene flickers, and you stumble slightly as the ground beneath you twists into mosaic tiles, and vines creep up walls painted in gold. A flute plays somewhere off-screen, and there he is, Dionysus, the god of wine, revelry, theater, madness, and, confusingly, rebirth. He's lounging on a bench, made entirely of grapes, raising a cup that never seems to empty. His hair glows like it's been kissed by moonlight and poor decisions. He looks at you like he knows you're carrying too much, then winks. Welcome to the after party. Dionysus isn't just about drinking, though that's definitely a theme. He represents transformation, ecstasy, breaking down the self so you can stumble into something new. The Greeks feared him as much as they loved him. After all, too much wine might free your soul, or leave you sleeping in a sheep trough. One mainstream fact. The Dionysia, a festival held in his honor, was the origin of classical Greek theatre. Tragedy and comedy alike were offerings to the wine god, whose power was believed to loosen tongues and shake up stale minds. A strange tidbit. He was born twice. Once from his mortal mother Semele, and then again from Zeus's thigh. Don't ask. Just know it involved lightning, divine surgery, and a lot of internal metaphorical storage space. Historians still argue whether Dionysus arrived late to the Greek pantheon as a foreign addition from Thrace or Phrygia, or if he'd always been there, hiding behind vines, watching the other gods play politics while he curated the soundtrack. He hands you a drink now. You hesitate. He laughs, shrugs, and drinks it himself. And then you're spinning again, this time into misty hills and a chariot rumbling across the sky. Helios drives past you with a nod, but you're here to meet the goddess of the hunt. Artemis steps from the trees like she's always been there, bow slung across her back, eyes sharp as obsidian, a white hound at her heels, and you're about to hike through her wild world. No permission slips required. Branches crunch beneath your feet as you follow her, Artemis, through a moonlit forest that seems to whisper with every breeze. Owls blink from twisted trees, and in the distance, a deer lifts its head, but does not run. Here, everything listens to her. She doesn't speak much. She doesn't have to. Goddess of the hunt, wilderness, young women, and the moon. Twin sister to Apollo, daughter of Leto, born with a bow in one hand and probably a checklist of rules in the other. Artemis isn't the cuddly kind of divine. She's fierce, precise, and notoriously unforgiving when you mess with her privacy or disrespect nature. She stops now, raises her hand, and you freeze too. A rabbit darts between your boots. She nods. Good. You're learning. Mainstream fact. Her temple at Ephesus was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Grand, columned, glittering with offerings from those who feared or admired her, especially young women about to marry and hunters hoping not to become the hunted. A weirder fringe detail. Some ancient writers believed Artemis's priestesses had to vow lifelong chastity, and anyone who broke the vow mysteriously disappeared into the forest, never seen again. One story claimed they became deer, cursed to be chased by Artemis herself until the end of time, and historians still argue whether Artemis was originally a pre-Greek fertility figure, gradually transformed into a divine wilderness warrior, or whether she always came with both the nurturing and the knives. She passes you a quiver, just in case. But before you can notch an arrow, the air shifts again. The forest flattens, the wind drops, and you smell salt, sea spray clinging to your sleeves like mist. A long shadow breaks the horizon. A trident gleams. Poseidon rises, tall as a shipmast, beard tangled like seaweed, eyes stormy with boredom, and the occasional need to sink an island or father a sea monster. You brace yourself as his wave crashes at your ankles. Not wet, but weighty, like standing in front of a mood swing, with a license to flood villages. Poseidon, god of the sea, earthquakes, horses, and salty vengeance. One of the big 3, he's often overshadowed by his brother Zeus and his sky tantrums. But Poseidon's anger is arguably worse. It rolls in slow, then slaps you sideways without warning. He smirks now, leans against his trident like it's just another lazy Sunday by the bay. The ocean behind him burps up a dolphin. Casual. Mainstream fact. The Greeks believed Poseidon caused earthquakes by smashing his trident into the ground, earning him the nickname Earthshaker. When sailors prayed for calm waters, they didn't just toss coins. They often sacrificed animals, or in some darker tales, unlucky prisoners. Quirkier theory? Some fringe myths say Poseidon could shapeshift into a horse and roam the beaches looking for nymphs to charm or prank. That's right. If you ever saw a weirdly smug stallion trotting through ancient Greece, there's a chance it was your local sea god just vibing. And historians still argue whether Poseidon was originally a freshwater god, associated with rivers and springs. Before he graduated to ruling the entire Aegean playlist, you watch him hurl a jellyfish into the sky. It lands with a pop. He nods, satisfied. The water drains like someone pulled the plug on the Mediterranean, and now you stand at the gates of the underworld. But don't worry, you're not staying. At least, probably not. The underworld is not hot. That surprises you. It's cold, clammy, really, with the kind of draft you'd expect in a damp basement with questionable mold and ancient secrets written in dust. The air is still, thick, and humming, like a throat trying not to cough. You descend slowly, led by the faint shuffle of someone who definitely doesn't blink much. A soul, a guide, maybe just a chill draft in a toga. Either way, you keep walking, and there he is, Hades, not evil, not monstrous, not the Greek devil, as pop culture might suggest, just tired. Like a middle manager who inherited a kingdom he didn't ask for and now has to oversee it for eternity. He sits on a throne carved from obsidian, blacker than your dreams on a bad night. A crown of twisted iron rests unevenly on his head. And Cerberus, yes, the three-headed dog, is curled at his feet snoring in stereo. Hades, ruler of the dead, god of wealth, yes, really, and the least social of the Olympians. He doesn't get invited to many parties, probably because he can't leave the underworld without the risk of someone staging a jailbreak. Mainstream historical belief? Hades wasn't seen as cruel, just inevitable. He kept the dead in place, maintained balance, and ensured no zombie uprisings disturbed the living. In Greek funerary customs, people often place coins in a corpse's mouth or hand as payment to Charon, the boatman ferrying souls across the river Styx. A fringe tidbit. Some mystery cults whispered that Hades held secret knowledge of rebirth. They hinted that the underworld wasn't just about endings, but beginnings too. One version of Hades was not a jailer, but a gardener of souls, tending the roots of life's next cycle. And historians still argue whether Hades' cults overlapped with those of Dionysus, creating a strange double god of wine and death. Parties and funerals, all in one deity. Sounds like an exhausting RSVP. And he gestures, and the mists part to reveal a smaller throne beside his. Empty. But not for long. Persephone arrives in a swirl of pomegranate red fabric. She's not a prisoner. Not exactly. That's the version you learned in school. But Greek myths are messy, and like most arranged marriages involving the underworld, it's complicated. Persephone, daughter of Demeter, queen of spring, and also part-time ruler of the realm of shadows. She spends half the year above, bringing blooms and sunshine, and the other half below, keeping the dead in line and making Hades eat salad. Mainstream myth? She was kidnapped by Hades, tricked into eating 6 pomegranate seeds, and bound to return every year. Demeter, in grief, let the earth wither. Thus, winter was born. Family drama with climate consequences. But there's a twisty take too. Some scholars suggest Persephone chose to eat the seeds, carving out her own kingdom, her own power. Not just a daughter or a victim, but a sovereign in her own right. And historians still argue whether Persephone was originally a goddess of death and transformation before being sweetened into a flower maiden by later poets. In some ancient cults, she's more terrifying than Hades, smiling softly while holding the keys to every locked door. You follow her through a field of asphodel, flowers that only bloom where the dead walk. She hums a tune you can't quite place, something soft, something older than the gods. You think you'll remember it in your dreams. Then, in a blink, the shadows fade. The earth warms, and a grapevine tickles your ankle. A flute begins to play, off-key, loudly. Oh no, he's back. You recognize the sound before you even spot the source. Wild, chaotic, a little obnoxious, like a kazoo in the hands of a tipsy satyr. And that's pretty much what it is. Pan has entered the scene. He's not one of the 12 Olympians, but that doesn't stop him from showing up uninvited. Half man, half goat, and all mischief, Pan bounds into view with a manic grin and twigs in his hair. He looks like the kind of guy who talks too loudly at cafes and never pays for his coffee. You're in Arcadia now. Rugged hills, tangled forests, the kind of place where GPS fails, and so does dignity. The god of the wild, shepherds, and rustic music doesn't believe in pants or personal space. His bare feet slap against the mossy ground, his pan pipe slung over one shoulder like a medieval Bluetooth speaker. Mainstream myth? Pan is the god of flocks and fertility. He protects shepherds, inspires sudden fear. Yes, panic comes from Pan, and chases nymphs who really aren't that into him. Fringe tidbit. He's one of the few Greek gods said to have actually died. According to Plutarch, a sailor once heard a voice cry, "The great god Pan is dead." Historians still argue whether this was early Christian propaganda or a misunderstood thunderclap. Some say it symbolized the decline of pagan worship. Others say Pan was just faking his death for a nap. Anyway, you can't hear your thoughts over the Goat Boys jam session. He plays a song that sounds suspiciously like ancient elevator music. Birds scatter, trees shake. A confused owl drops its lunch. Pan doesn't notice. He's too busy spinning in circles and trying to impress a dryad who's actively pretending to be a tree. You suspect she's not pretending. As you sidestep his chaotic energy, you spot someone watching with detached amusement. Hermes, unlike Pan. Hermes is polished, sharp-eyed, and dressed like he read the toga's user manual. Messenger of the gods, patron of travelers, thieves, and those awkward social situations where no one knows how to end the conversation. He's leaning on his caduceus, a winged staff with two snakes who are clearly in love and won't admit it. His sandals have wings. His smile says he's 3 steps ahead of everyone, including the script. Mainstream take? Hermes is the cleverest of the gods. He invented the lyre, stole Apollo's cows as a baby, and still got away with it by gifting him music. He delivers souls to the underworld and mail to Mount Olympus. He's basically the divine version of a multi-tool. Fringe detail. Some scholars believe Hermes merged over time with Egyptian Thoth, becoming Hermes Trismegistus, a mystical figure in alchemy and magic. Historians still argue whether Hermes was originally a boundary stone spirit who later evolved into a full-fledged deity. He offers you a knowing nod. Somehow it feels like both a greeting and a farewell. You ask him what happens next. He shrugs. That depends. Want to crash a party? Before you can answer, you're swept along. The forest disappears. A palace blooms in its place. Columns, ivy, giggling laughter, and perfume so strong it could be declared a war crime. Welcome to Olympus after dark, and standing in the center of it all is a woman with a rose in one hand and a dagger in the other. Aphrodite. Aphrodite doesn't walk into your field of vision, so much has happened to it. The way moonlight happens, or food poisoning. You're not entirely sure if she's wearing perfume, or if you're just hallucinating lilacs, salt water, and light despair. She glances at you, not seductively, not shyly, just confidently, like she already knows how this entire encounter plays out, and it ends with someone crying over their ex. She is, after all, the goddess of love, beauty, desire, and apparently making every other mythological being feel underdressed. Mainstream version? Aphrodite is born from the sea foam after Uranus gets, shall we say, forcibly defathered by Cronus. The ocean bubbles, the breeze deguises, and out she rises like a fashion model emerging from a luxury skincare commercial. She has a magical belt, think divine mood ring, that makes anyone fall in love with her. And she's not shy about loaning it out, especially if it adds drama. Zeus probably regrets that decision. You try not to stare as she turns to flirt with Ares, a long-time on-again, off-again partner, who broods in the corner like a jilted prom date wearing 300 pounds of bronze. Ares, of course, is the god of war. Not strategy, that's Athena's gig. No, Ares is more of a blood and chaos, hit first, maybe grunt later kind of guy. He's got the vibe of someone who punches a wall to express feelings. They make an odd couple. Love and war, silk and steel, a whispered promise and a bar brawl. Aphrodite tosses her hair like it contains national secrets. Ares adjusts his spear like he's polishing it for attention. No one else dares interrupt. Quirky tidbit: despite being lovers, they're caught in a net during one of their trysts, crafted by Aphrodite's husband Hephaestus, who got tired of the gossip. The other gods came to laugh. Literally. That's the whole scene. It's divine reality TV. Historians still argue whether this myth was a critique of infidelity, a lesson in humility, or just an ancient joke about how even gods have messy love triangles. Behind them you spot Eros, Cupid, essentially with a bow, a smirk, and the eyes of someone who definitely just fired a heart arrow into the wrong centaur. You watch as Dionysus enters. Of course he does. You smell him before you see him. Wine, incense, and the sharp sweet rot of overripe grapes. He's barefoot, wearing a crown of ivy, and leading a small parade of maenads, satyrs, and one extremely confused donkey. Dionysus is the god of wine, revelry, and letting your hair down in the most chaotic way possible. He winks at you. It's unclear whether that means hello, watch your drink, or you're about to be in a play you didn't audition for. Mainstream myth? Dionysus spreads joy and madness in equal measure. He's a god of contradictions, both liberator and destroyer, creator of bliss and bringer of frenzy. His cult was particularly popular with those who felt repressed. Women, outsiders, people who needed a good excuse to shout at trees. Fringe fact: some scholars link Dionysus to older, pre-Greek fertility gods. Others believe he was imported from Thrace or Anatolia, and only later accepted into the Olympian 12. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was always a Greek god or a traveling act that just got really, really popular. You try to follow the party, but the room spins like a drunk carousel. Someone hands you a fig. You eat it. It's either delicious or cursed. Maybe both. Then you trip, fall through something softer than air, and you land in a garden. Not just any garden. You've arrived at the edge of death itself. It's eerily quiet. The kind of quiet that hums in your ears and makes your own breath sound like a drumbeat. The garden isn't dead exactly. It's just eternal. The leaves don't sway. The trees don't rustle. Everything exists in a sort of polite suspension, like it knows you're not really supposed to be here. And then you see her, Persephone. She's not what you expect. Not sad. Not radiant. Not some weeping spring maiden. She's just there. Calm. Collected. Wearing a crown of pomegranate seeds, and the gaze of someone who has seen all of it and decided to keep most of it to herself. Hey guys, tonight we descend into the underworld, not with fire and brimstone, but with whispers, blooming shadows, and gods who deal more in silence than thunder. Just kidding. You probably won't survive this if you ever try to quote ancient contracts in real life. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, drop your location and local time in the comments, just so Persephone knows who's visiting. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together, because now you're standing at the edge of Greek myth's deepest rabbit hole, the realm of Hades. Hades, god of the underworld, not to be confused with death itself. That's Thanatos' job. Hades gets a bad rap, mostly because, underworld. But really, he's more accountant than villain. Keeps the souls in check, the fields of asphodel tidy, and the rivers flowing on schedule. He doesn't torture souls, he just keeps them filed. You shuffle forward, passing the river Styx. It gurgles with the sound of lost oaths and unspoken regrets. The boatman, Charon, eyes you from under his hood. His silence is somehow louder than a scolding grandma. And here's the twist. Persephone chose to stay. Yes, we know the story. She was kidnapped by Hades, taken into the underworld, tricked into eating pomegranate seeds so she'd have to return. But historians still argue whether this was a straight-up abduction or a coded story about seasonal cycles, feminine agency, or the importance of knowing when to leave a party. The myth evolves. In later versions, Persephone isn't just a passive victim, she becomes queen. She holds power in this dim realm. Souls tremble before her. Even Hades listens when she speaks. Quirky tidbit. In some Orphic versions, Persephone is mother to Zagreus, a proto-Dionysus figure who is dismembered and reborn, a symbolic echo of death and rebirth tied to vegetation cycles. That's right. Your grocery store's produce aisle has deeper symbolism than you thought. You hear barking. Not just any barking. Deep, echoing, multiplied. Cerberus, 3 heads, 0 tolerance for trespassers, and the posture of a very good boy who just happens to guard eternity. Each head seems to sniff at your soul separately. You try not to think of what would happen if even one of them sneezes. You pass him, slowly, respectfully, with every polite intention in the world. And then you see the shades, souls drifting in their thousands. Some whisper, some stare. Most just shuffle, suspended in the kind of half-conscious haze you feel during mandatory meetings or airport layovers. You're not sure how long you've been wandering down here. Minutes, centuries. Time doesn't care. You could nap on a stone bench and wake up in Plato's imagination. Somewhere beyond, you spot the judges, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus, deciding the fates of new arrivals with the sort of impartial coldness you'd expect from a really well-designed spreadsheet. Another hallway glows faintly in the distance, lined with poppies and glowing fungus. And surprise, it leads back up to Eleusis. Because Persephone doesn't just rule the underworld. She's also the goddess of rebirth, renewal, springtime, a dual life, queen of death and goddess of green things. The Eleusinian mysteries, rituals performed in her honor, were some of the most sacred, secretive rites in the ancient world. Historians still argue whether these ceremonies involve mind-altering substances, theatrical performances, or just the emotional power of community and grain metaphors. But one thing's certain, her myth reminds you that even in the darkest places, seeds wait to bloom. You feel yourself pulled upward, like sap rising through roots. Light returns slowly, and so does another face, Hermes. Oh good, it's him again. Hermes again, because of course it's him. He's waiting with a smirk that somehow says both. I've seen things you wouldn't believe, and you stepped in something weird and I'm not telling you. This time, he doesn't guide you by the hand, just starts walking, assuming you'll follow. And you do, partly because you want to, partly because no one else seems to be offering directions back to the land of the living. Your feet move, but your mind lingers. Persephone's face haunts your thoughts in the gentlest possible way. That crown of seeds, that serene authority. It's not fear that sticks with you, it's awe. But now you're rising, past the asphodel meadows and the half-forgotten souls, past the river of wailing the Lethe, where memories dissolve. You don't sip it, not yet. You'd rather remember. Hermes whistles, badly. Apparently the god of speed isn't the god of rhythm. He hums something that sounds suspiciously like elevator music from 500 BCE. You don't question it. The earth above you begins to shift from darkness to dappled sunlight. The scent of myrtle, laurel, and old scrolls fills your nose. You blink, and you're suddenly back in Olympus, again. But this time it feels different. Like you've been through something, earned your seat in this mythic waiting room. Aphrodite glances your way, but doesn't pause in polishing her nails. Athena gives you a side eye that may or may not be approval. Ares lounges with a bored expression, sharpening a spear that no one seems eager to comment on. Then, over at the end of the celestial courtyard, you see them. The Muses, 9 of them, singing, dancing, rolling their eyes in harmony. Each represents a domain: history, tragedy, comedy, music, astronomy, and so on. They don't explain who's who. You're just supposed to know, which is deeply unfair. But that's mythology for you. They notice you. They don't stop what they're doing. But one offers you a wink. Not flirtatious, more like, you're part of this now. And you realize, this was never about just learning myths. It's about absorbing them, living inside them, recognizing that even in their contradictions and weirdness, they've shaped how humans tell stories, dream dreams, and fear the dark. Zeus chuckles from afar. You don't make eye contact. You really don't want to know why he's chuckling. As you wander, scenes unfold in overlapping ripples. Dionysus throws a party, of course, but this time he invites philosophers. It goes so badly. Hephaestus forges a talking dog bowl. For fun. Demeter asks if you've seen her daughter. You tell her yes. She nods once and continues pacing. You try to sit, but Olympus doesn't do chairs. Everything's just floating platforms and golden beams. It's lovely, but exhausting in a maximalist Pinterest board kind of way. So you lie down on a nearby cloud. Hermes gives you a thumbs up, then vanishes like a magician who's late for 5 other gigs. You close your eyes, but even here, thoughts drift through you like curious birds. Why did Cronus swallow his kids and think that would work long term? Why did Hera stay married to Zeus and not start an epic goddess-only book club in retaliation? Why do satyrs always look like they're one flute note away from getting kicked out of a wedding? Historians still argue whether these myths were meant to explain nature, control the masses, or just entertain bored shepherds on long afternoons. And honestly, the answer's probably yes. That's the beauty of mythology. It's messy, inconsistent, contradictory, divine, and deeply human. A mainstream fact to tuck under your pillow. The Greek pantheon helped shape not just stories and art, but the foundations of Western thought, through philosophy, ethics, drama, and even politics, and a fringe tidbit to dream on. Some ancient Greeks believed the gods weren't gods at all, but distant memories of powerful ancient kings and queens, glorified over centuries until thunderbolts seemed plausible. So as you lie there, on a mythological cloud, high above a dream version of the Mediterranean, you realize this wasn't a history lesson. It was a lullaby. The gods might bicker forever. The underworld may whisper eternally. Olympus may never stop glittering. But you're allowed to sleep. Your eyes softens as the last threads of divine chaos unravel around you. The voices quiet. The clouds dim. Everything in this high, echoing sky begins to feel softer, thicker, like your brain is slowly being wrapped in warm cotton. You let your breath stretch. Inhale, long and deep. Exhale, slower still. You picture Hermes slipping back into the breeze, wings brushing leaves you can't see. You picture Persephone walking a quiet path, her hand grazing every fern and stone with calm familiarity. The Muses stop singing now. Not suddenly, just gradually. Like they're humming your dreams into being, and then walking away to let them take form. Even Zeus, from his enormous spark-studded throne, fades into the background. Just one more distant light in a sky that no longer requires your attention. You've wandered a long way through tangled myths and ancient minds. You've met gods who forget your name, and gods who never forget anything. You've listened to stories people once told by firelight, wrapped in wool, while the night howled outside. And now, it's your turn to fall into that same hush. Your head sinks into the pillow. Your muscles surrender. There's no more thunder, no more riddles, Just you, suspended in stillness, held by centuries, cradled in myth. Sleep now. You've earned it.